course he did. In terms of policy, I mean, I think we have to just divide that into what sort of flaws or you know.
Yeah, let's take it on a statesmanship level first.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, he began as a very naive, very dependent young monarch, and the man he was dependent upon was his regent, Behram Khan, who was a loyalist to his father and was the vice-regent in Akbar's minor years. So at that point, of course, the Mughal Empire was consolidated by Behram Khan, whereas Akbar remained under the veil, as his own chroniclers say. But once he decided that he was going to be in charge, we see in his treatment of Behram Khan, the exile, the humiliation, and finally the assassination of Behram Khan, we see a trait that is visible in any ruler of the time. In the campaign of Chittor, for example, it is very difficult to differentiate between Akbar's ancestor Temurlen and Akbar in their treatment of civilian populations, where Akbar ordered a general massacre in order to buttress and reinforce his claims to rulership. His own relationship with his children was a very unsettled one. What he expected from them and what they held him responsible for, it was something that wasn't settled until he was on his deathbed. And so, you know, I mean, there as a father, you see that perhaps, you know, he wasn't quite, you know, doing the right thing. But in terms of statesmanship, again, I don't think one can call it flaws. It's something that was normal for the times, and to look at it in that perspective as something that was the norm, the standard, you know, the routine to do things. For example, his treatment of rebels and rebellions, particularly in the northwest and the northwest frontier as we know it now, was very harsh. But it was a time when he and Mughal armies themselves had suffered a lot at their hands in terms of losing close colleagues, the grandees of empire, you know, and in order to keep that superiority, the supremacy, he had to resort to extreme, yes,
harsh through our modern filters.
military measures. Of course, it's harsh, but
yeah,
you know, it wasn't
at
at the time. And even since Akbar, you see there have been, you know, emperors and kings all over the world who always did things according to their time, which we might say are morally, or, you know, in terms of sort of liberalism, something we scoff at, but not, you know, not for them it wasn't. Of course, his attempts to bring this secularization into court, as I said, and into imperial policy, was seen by many to be flawed, particularly the orthodoxy of the time.
Yeah.
The Muslim orthodoxy of the time saw his introduction of Hindu practices at court, his matrimonial alliances, as something that threatened the Mughal Empire, and therefore you could say, well, in terms of statesmanship and politics, it was flawed. But again, their reservations or their reaction to it was itself founded in politics, because their own position was mitigated or weakened. So again, I mean, I don't think it was a flaw. It was a political reaction of the time, where certain individuals or institutions thought that well, our base is now moving, so we've got to stop this. But over the centuries and over the years, that has been painted by Orthodox historians and Muslim traditionalists as a flaw, whereas the counter-argument to that, of course, goes again, that's another extreme, where you have the you know, later the Victorian historians, for example, who paint Akbar out to be this demigod almost, and then sort of, you know, pose him as a model for their subsequent rule and their practices, and say, well, you know, here was this king, and look how closely we are related to him in terms of our policies and what we're doing. Of course, neither are entirely correct. They're not entirely wrong, but they're not entirely correct. Akbar was his own man, who had very clear definitions and very clear vision about what he wanted to do in India and what he wanted to create. And that is what he got on with.